In 2023, Spotify paid out over $4 billion to rights holders. That sounds like a lot of money. But here is the shocking part. The average artist on that platform earned less than $400 for the entire year. $400. For 12 months of their music being available to hundreds of millions of listeners around the world. That single statistic tells you everything and nothing at the same time about what streaming has done to the music industry. So what actually happened? How did we go from a world where buying an album meant something to a world where a song can be heard 1 million times and the person who made it still cannot pay rent? In the next 10 minutes, you are going to find out exactly how streaming dismantled and rebuilt the music industry from the ground up, who won, who lost, and the one counterintuitive truth that the biggest streaming platforms absolutely do not want you thinking about. Because the story is much stranger and much more complicated than anyone is letting on. Let us start at the beginning. Before streaming existed, the music industry ran on a model that had been working, more or less, since the invention of recorded sound. You made music. You pressed it onto a physical format. People paid money to own a copy. Vinyl records gave way to cassettes. Cassettes gave way to compact discs. And by the late 1990s, the CD market was generating over $14 billion a year in the United States alone. The industry was bloated, comfortable, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Then Napster arrived in 1999. Almost overnight, tens of millions of people discovered they could get music for free. The industry sued. They won in court. Napster was shut down. But the behavior had changed permanently. People had tasted free music and they were not going back. Piracy exploded through other platforms, and between 2000 and 2010, recorded music revenues in the US fell by more than half. Labels were in full panic mode. Something had to replace the CD, and nobody could agree on what it was. Apple launched iTunes in 2003 and brought some order back to the chaos. The 99-cent single was a stroke of genius. It was cheap enough to feel reasonable, easy enough to use, and legal. But it was still a download model. You still owned the song. What came next would change everything about that basic relationship between listener and music. Spotify launched in Sweden in 2008 and arrived in the United States in 2011. The pitch was almost absurdly simple. Every song ever recorded, available instantly, for a flat monthly fee. Or for free with ads. No downloads, no ownership, just access. It sounded too good to be true for listeners. And for many artists, it turned out it was. Here is what nobody talks about when they celebrate the streaming revolution. The shift from ownership to access fundamentally changed the economics of music at every level. When you bought a CD, the label got roughly $16. When you bought a song on iTunes, they got about 70 cents. When someone streams a song, the rights holder gets somewhere between 0.3 and 0.5 cents per stream. Do the math on that. You need over 1,000 streams just to equal one iTunes download. You need over 30,000 streams to equal the revenue from one CD sale. But wait. Because here is where it gets genuinely interesting. Total global recorded music revenues have actually recovered. After that catastrophic decade of decline, the industry crossed back above $26 billion in global revenue in 2023. Streaming did save the industry. Just not the part of the industry you might be rooting for. The winners in the streaming era are almost entirely the major labels. Universal Music Group, Sony Music, and Warner Music collectively own the rights to the vast majority of commercially successful music in history. When Spotify negotiates licensing deals, they negotiate with those three companies. Those three companies own equity stakes in Spotify itself. When Spotify went public in 2018, Universal Music Group cashed out a stake worth over $1 billion. The labels literally owned a piece of the platform paying them. That is not a coincidence. That is leverage. So what does this mean for independent artists, the ones actually making music without the backing of a major label? The picture is deeply complicated. On one hand, barriers to entry have never been lower. You can record a song in your bedroom, upload it to DistroKid for $20 a year, and have it on Spotify by tomorrow morning. 1 billion people theoretically have access to your music. That is genuinely revolutionary. 20 years ago, you needed a label deal just to get your music into a record store. But discoverability is a different problem entirely. Spotify currently hosts over 100 million tracks. 100 million. The platform adds approximately 60,000 new songs every single day. Standing out in that environment is not just hard. It is statistically overwhelming. And the algorithm that decides who hears what is not neutral. It favors tracks that get saved, that get added to playlists, that generate high completion rates. New artists with no existing audience are fighting uphill on every single metric. Here is a stat that reframes everything. The top 0.2% of artists on streaming platforms account for over 90% of all streams. Read that again. 0.2%. The long tail that streaming was supposed to democratize? It exists. But it is almost invisible in terms of actual listening time and revenue. The superstars got bigger. Everyone else got access to a global stage with nobody in the seats. Taylor Swift figured this out before almost anyone else. In 2014, she pulled her entire catalog from Spotify in protest, calling it an experiment that does not fairly compensate artists. She went back 3 years later, but her point had landed. The conversation about streaming royalties was now mainstream. And she demonstrated something important. Artists with massive leverage can negotiate with platforms. Most artists have no leverage whatsoever. The playlist economy deserves its own examination here. Getting placed on a major Spotify playlist, an editorial playlist like today's Top Hits or Rap Caviar, is now one of the most valuable things that can happen to a song. Those placements can generate millions of streams overnight. Labels spend enormous energy cultivating relationships with playlist editors. Some smaller acts have allegedly paid for playlist placements through intermediaries, a practice Spotify officially prohibits but has struggled to fully eliminate. Playlists replace radio in terms of cultural taste-making power. And just like radio before it, access to that power is not equally distributed. Now here is the counterintuitive insight I promised you earlier. Streaming may have actually saved live music. Here is why. When music became effectively free to listen to, the experience of seeing an artist perform live became one of the only remaining premium products in music. Concert ticket revenues have exploded in the streaming era. Global live music revenues hit over $30 billion in 2023, surpassing recorded music for the first time ever. For established touring artists, this is a golden age. Streaming functions essentially as a free marketing machine that drives people to concerts. The music is the advertisement. The show is the product. This restructuring has also changed how artists think about releasing music. The album as a format is weakening. Streaming platforms reward consistent engagement, which means frequent single releases perform better algorithmically than one big album drop every 2 years. Many artists now release music in a near-continuous cycle just to stay relevant in the algorithm. The creative implications of that are enormous and not entirely positive. There is also the question of catalog. Old music has never been more accessible or more listened to. In 2022, catalog tracks, meaning songs more than 18 months old, accounted for over 70% of all music consumption in the United States. People are streaming the Beatles and Fleetwood Mac and Michael Jackson right alongside new releases. This is great for labels who own those masters. It creates a strange competitive dynamic where new artists are essentially competing for attention against every popular song ever recorded simultaneously. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to BuzzCore for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.